David Fruman, Academic Director of DPS STEM, saying hello from the comforts of my dining room in Irvine. I hope you're all staying healthy and finding ways to get your work done and your exercise and socializing via the internet. And now that you are restricted from going to the lab and doing your bench research, I hope you're using this time to catch up on data analysis, manuscript writing, fellowship writing, review articles, and all those other tasks that one never seems to have enough time to do. But of course, you don't want to forget about professional development. Dr. Harinder Singh, who's the director of this program, and myself have been working hard to keep the operations running and to transfer our regular programming into an online format. For example, today's Life Beyond the PhD program will be delivered through a Zoom conference. Keep track of what we're doing through the biweekly digest and through our website, and I encourage you to continue to develop your career plans and to use our platform and all the programming to achieve your current and future goals in your research and professional careers. And reach out if you have any questions. We think that we can deliver the same quality, perhaps to a greater number of people with the increased flexibility in everybody's time and schedules. So with that, I will wish you all well and hope to see you soon on a Zoom meeting.
Well, it's nice to virtually meet everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. These are some technology things you just have to kind of get used to, roll with the punches, especially as an MSL. These things are going to happen from time to time, but you have to learn how to adapt. So about interpersonal skills, communication, teamwork, leadership. These are all skill sets that you can learn. I think, again, you're learning a lot of those as a research scientist, but you can improve upon them. And I'll be honest, there are some kind of inherent skills that you kind of have to become an MSL. If you're socially awkward, you're probably not going to be a great fit. Okay, next slide, please. So again, I'll try to quickly get through this, but I'm going to be talking a little bit about what an MSL is, kind of go into the nuts and bolts about a daily basis, talk about the career outlook and salary, which is fun stuff. We'll talk a little bit about my career path, as I said, and my motivations for why I wanted to become an MSL. I'll briefly kind of go over how to become an MSL. That's, of course, a talk all of its own, to be honest. Career projections. So let's say you're already an MSL. What can you do from there? And if we have time, I would love to try to do some Q&A. If we run out of time, I'm happy to come back again or maybe talk offline with you individually. Okay? So next slide, please. Yeah, so, when I first was a graduate student, I kept hearing, the term Medical Science Liaison thrown around. I didn't really know what it was. I had, many MSLs come into our graduate school to give talks. And, I always thought it was just kind of like a sales job. For me, I never really got a good explanation. But the way to really kind of think about it is we are sort of like the geek squad for pharma. We are field-based. We are getting out. We're meeting face-to-face with healthcare providers. Very importantly, we're developing these relationships. And we're really there as the experts for our drugs. And we're there to give guidance about how to use our drugs. We're involved in trying to get clinical trials up and running. And it's not sales. That's one thing I want to emphasize. This is not a sales job. We try to remain unbiased. And, again, you have to have that medical and scientific expertise to really prosper in this job. Okay, next slide, please. So just a real quick overview about the origins of where Medical Science Liaison came from. So back in 1967, there was what's called the Upjohn Pharmaceutical Company, and their sales were starting to decline. And William Upjohn was getting a lot of feedback that the healthcare providers wanted to go deeper into the science and the data They wanted to know about more about the mechanism of action and that type of thing. And the sales reps just really weren't able to provide that kind of information. So he started a very small team with some pharmacists that were going out in the field, meeting with doctors, and they were able to give those insights and that critical information on a more scientific level. And the healthcare providers absolutely loved it. There's a lot of positive feedback that came from it. They started to see a little bit of increase in the sales. And so a lot of other companies caught on to this. And so, they started out with a small team and expanded it. Initially, it was only pharmacists. If you could please go to the next slide. But this role has really evolved since then. Now it encompasses PhDs, medical doctors, clinicians, and the role itself has really taken on a new life. So initially, it was really just getting out, meeting with doctors, and giving data. But within the pharmaceutical industry, we've taken on a lot of new roles. We're really helping with, to guide drug development. We're working with sales and marketing oftentimes, helping to get a drug approved. So it's really become an evolving role. And every pharmaceutical company you'll find really uses their MSLs in different ways. So it's not going to be the same everywhere. Okay, please go next slide. So one thing you're going to learn a lot about if you research an MSL is you're going to hear about KOLs. So what is a KOL? It's a key opinion leader. Some companies might call them thought leaders or external stakeholders. Most companies use the term KOLs. And a KOL is really the leading expert within their field. So for me, I work in a dermatology field, so I'm working with top dermatologists. Most of them are physicians, but we do get some that are physician's assistants or nurse practitioners. But in general, these are usually physicians. And a key opinion leader is one that we value their expertise and their insights. Most often, they are part of clinical trials. So they're running clinical trials, trying to get our drugs approved, gathering data. They're helping to write manuscripts, helping to write guidelines for patient treatment. They're attending a lot of different conferences, giving talks. So these are the top, creme de la creme of the field that I'm mostly engaging with. And so if you look at this chart, kind of a pyramid, I'm mostly meeting with the top KOLs. So again, these are nationally and oftentimes internationally known physicians that are part of these clinical trials or helping to get drugs, approved. And these are the ones that I'm spending most of my time with. Now, you would also, of course, have your community doctors. These are doctors that are, just in your town, smaller, not really well-renowned, but seeing a lot of patients, writing a lot of prescriptions. These are usually seen by the sales representatives, but there is, of course, a lot of overlap. There will be a lot of questions that could come from these community HCPs that will require an MSL to come in and, give a deeper dive on the data. So, of course, I will interact with community HCPs. And of course, these community HCPs may want to get involved in research. And so it's my job to identify these promising, kind of small-time doctors and grow them up to become a national KOL. So there is overlap. But for the most part, I'm interacting with the top KOLs within the country. Okay? Next slide, please. So as an MSL, we're really trying to be experts within our therapeutic area. When it comes to our drugs, we should, of course, know much more about our drug than any of our KOLs. When it comes to the therapy, we try to do our best. But typically, these doctors are going to know a lot more than you. They've gone to medical school, they've done residencies, they're going to know a lot more about these disease states. But we try to learn enough to carry, an intelligent conversation. And it's an evolving thing. You're continually learning, you're continually trying to become an expert in these therapeutic areas. So these are some of the drugs that I've worked with. You can see it has a lot of different therapeutic areas. I've worked with drugs for psoriasis, eczema, toenail fungus, acne. It's a lot of things that I have to learn and remember, and so it's a lot. lot of companies, you might just have one therapeutic area. Other companies, you might have several. And so, again, it becomes a bit of a challenge, but you learn a lot as you go on. You learn as you have these discussions, as you go to conferences and whatnot. You just, again, you're going to have a lot more expertise than a sales rep. Again, you're a doctor, and you should try to learn as much as you can about these areas. Okay? So what are my meetings with KOLs like? Oftentimes they're in-office visits. It really depends on how much time they have. If it's the very first time I've met with a doctor, yeah, most oftentimes these are in an office. This is kind of like a date, right? You typically, the first couple meetings are just getting to know you. And as you progress, you start to get deeper conversations about data, about the therapeutic area, about research. And, again, you're trying to develop these relationships. Conferences are a great way to meet with a lot of different KOLs. Oftentimes it becomes more quantity than quality. So you might meet with a lot of KOLs, but the discussions you have are just kind of brief. I prefer to have a longer conversation if I can. You get a lot more insights that way. Dinners or lunches are also a great way to interact. Kind of let your hair down, have more of a social kind of interaction. But again, you have to discuss some science, some data during these meetings. Group discussions, so I might give a roundtable where I can present my data. And again, you get a lot of good interaction when you have a group discussion. A couple things I want to emphasize is that we're not sales reps, we're not selling. I'm not getting a commission based on the number of prescriptions. And HCPs and KOLs like this. They like the fact that I'm coming in unbiased. I'm not pushing our drug over another drug. We're just trying to have a good interaction. And it's a great way to gain trust from your KOL. So they know that, yeah, this is someone I can depend on and get good, honest feedback from. We try to, of course, keep up with the data, the research, become experts in the therapeutic area, have those types of discussions. There's something called off-label conversations. So that's, again, something you're going to hear a lot about. What is this off-label discussion? So when you have a prescription and you look on the bottle, you're going to have all the information, the dosage, the efficacy, all these types of things. That's the label. That is what went through the FDA to get approved. Anything on that label, a sales representative can talk about. Anything that is not on that label, so using a drug with a different dosage, using a drug for a different disease state, any of these types of things, those are called off-label. Only MSLs can have those conversations. Okay, sales reps cannot. So again, this is something that we can really use our expertise to have deeper discussions with our KOLs about these off-label conversations. That being said, off-label conversations have to be reactive. They cannot be proactive. I can't just go in and say, hey, doctor, did you know we have data that we can now use our drug on XYZ? It's a bit of an art as an MSL to try to get the KOL to get onto that topic where I can start having those off-label conversations. Again, I'm trying to develop relationships with these KOLs. I really want them in my back pocket. I want it to the point where I've got their cell phone number and I can give them a call. And I can get them to come to a meeting, or I can have them discuss our data during a podium presentation. I really want to try to develop a relationship where it gets to that point. Okay, speaker training. So a lot of our KOLs will give promotional talks about our drug. This is something that we as MSLs do not do. So, if there's a conference and they're giving a promotional talk about our drug, about our data, this has to be done by a KOL. But I am the one teaching them that presentation, that they know exactly how to present our data. Okay, and of course, gaining insights. As I said here, a good MSL listens 90% of the time, talks 10%. It's the opposite of a sales rep. It's almost like a therapist. I'm saying, oh, what are your thoughts on this, doctor? What do you think about this? How would you do XYZ? Fine. Really uses their MSLs in different ways. So it's not going to be the same everywhere. Okay. Please go next slide. So one thing you're going to learn a lot about if you research an MSL is you're going to hear about KOLs. So what is a KOL? It's a key opinion leader. Some companies might call them thought leaders or external stakeholders. Most companies use the term KOLs. And a KOL is really the leading expert within their field. So for me, I work in a dermatology field, so I'm working with top dermatologists. Most of them are physicians, but we do get some that are physician's assistants or nurse practitioners. But in general, these are usually physicians. And a key opinion leader is one that we value their expertise and their insights. Most often, they are part of clinical trials. So they're running clinical trials, trying to get our drugs approved, gathering data. They're helping to write manuscripts, helping to write guidelines for patient treatment. They're attending a lot of different conferences, giving talks. So these are the top, creme de la creme of the field that I'm mostly engaging with. And so if you look at this chart, kind of a pyramid, I'm mostly meeting with the top KOLs. So again, these are nationally and oftentimes internationally known physicians that are part of these clinical trials or are helping to get drugs, approved. And these are the ones that I'm spending most of my time with. Now, you would also, of course, have your community doctors. These are doctors that are, just in your town, smaller, not really well renowned, but seeing a lot of patients, writing a lot of prescriptions. These are usually seen by the sales representatives, but there is, of course, a lot of overlap. There will be a lot of questions that could come from these community HCPs that will require an MSL to come in and give a deeper dive on the data. So, of course, I will interact with community HCPs. And of course, these community HCPs may want to get involved in research. And so it's my job to identify these promising, kind of small-time doctors and grow them up to become a national KOL. So there is overlap. But for the most part, I'm interacting with the top KOLs within the country. Okay? Next slide, please. So as an MSL, we're really trying to be experts within our therapeutic area. When it comes to our drugs, we should, of course, know much more about our drug than any of our KOLs. When it comes to the therapy, we try to do our best. But typically, these doctors are going to know a lot more than you. They've gone to medical school, they've done residencies, they're going to know a lot more about these disease states. But we try to learn enough to carry, an intelligent conversation. And it's an evolving thing. You're continually learning, you're continually trying to become an expert in these therapeutic areas. So these are some of the drugs that I've worked with. You can see it has a lot of different therapeutic areas. I've worked with drugs for psoriasis, eczema, toenail fungus, acne. It's a lot of things that I have to learn and remember, and so it's a lot. A lot of companies, you might just have one therapeutic area. Other companies, you might have several. And so again, it becomes a bit of a challenge. But you learn a lot as you go on. You learn as you have these discussions, as you go to conferences and whatnot. You're going to have a lot more expertise than a sales rep. Again, you're a doctor, and you should try to learn as much as you can about these areas. Okay. So what are my meetings with KOLs like? Oftentimes they're in-office visits. It really depends on how much time they have. If it's the very first time I've met with a doctor, most oftentimes these are in an office. This is kind of like a date, right? Typically, the first couple meetings are just getting to know you. And as you progress, you start to get deeper conversations about data, about the therapeutic area, about research. And, again, you're trying to develop these relationships. Conferences are a great way to meet with a lot of different KOLs. Oftentimes, it becomes more quantity than quality. So you might meet with a lot of KOLs, but the discussions you have are just kind of brief. I prefer to have a longer conversation if I can. You get a lot more insights that way. Dinners or lunches are also a great way to interact. Kind of let your hair down, have more of a social kind of interaction. But again, you have to discuss some science, some data during these meetings. Group discussions, so I might give a roundtable where I can present my data. And again, you get a lot of good interaction when you have a group discussion. A couple things I want to emphasize is that we're not sales reps. We're not selling. I'm not getting a commission based on the number of prescriptions. And HCPs and KOLs like this. They like the fact that I'm coming in unbiased. I'm not pushing our drug over another drug. We're just trying to have a good interaction. And it's a great way to gain trust from your KOL. Because they know that, this is someone I can depend on and get good, honest feedback from. We try to, of course, keep up with the data, the research. become experts in the therapeutic area, have those types of discussions. There's something called off-label conversations. So that's, again, something you're going to hear a lot about. What is this off-label discussion? So when you have a prescription and you look on the bottle, you're going to have all the information, the dosage, the efficacy, all these types of things. That's the label. That is what went through the FDA to get approved. Anything on that label, a sales representative can talk about. Anything that is not on that label, so using a drug with a different dosage, using a drug for a different disease state, any of these types of things, those are called off-label. Only MSLs can have those conversations. Okay, sales reps cannot. So again, this is something that we can really use our expertise to have deeper discussions with our KOLs about these off-label conversations. That being said, off-label conversations have to be reactive. They cannot be proactive. I can't just go in and say, hey, doctor, did you know we have data that we can now use our drug on XYZ? It's a bit of an art as an MSL to try to get the KOL to get onto that topic where I can start having those off-label conversations. Again, I'm trying to develop relationships with these KOLs. I really want them in my back pocket. I want it to the point where I've got their cell phone number and I can give them a call. And I can get them to come to a meeting, or I can have them discuss our data during a podium presentation. I really want to try to develop a relationship where it gets to that point. Okay, speaker training. So a lot of our KOLs will give promotional talks about our drug. This is something that we as MSLs do not do. So if there's a conference and they're giving a promotional talk about our drug, about our data, this has to be done by a KOL. But I am the one teaching them that presentation, that they know exactly how to present our data. Okay, and of course, gaining insights. As I said here, a good MSL listens 90% of the time, talks 10%. It's the opposite of a sales rep. It's almost like a therapist. I'm saying, oh, what are your thoughts on this, doctor? What do you think about this? How would you do X, Y, Z? And I'm gaining these insights from the KOL that I can bring back to my manager, to my company, and say, you know what, there's a gap in knowledge here. Or, hey, you know what, these doctors are using our drug for X, Y, Z. Maybe we should try to do a study on that, maybe a clinical trial. So we're gaining these insights and we're really driving the direction of our drug. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I've kind of touched upon it, but so in field, yes, I'm engaging with these KOLs. We're trying to get them involved with our company, with studies, giving talks. There is absolutely an education component as an MSL. For instance, we have a new drug that we're launching that has a cytokine involved with a disease state that a lot of HCPs are not familiar with. So I'm giving presentations about that cytokine. What is its involvement in pathophysiology of the disease? So there is an education component. Data generation. So, especially with clinical trials, we're trying to make sure our providers are on track with patient recruitment, see if there's any issues with any of the studies. Cross-functional team support. So that means that I'm working with the sales teams, I'm working with marketing, managed care. We're really involved in the heart of everything within the company. Okay, next slide, please. And so that kind of shows this. So you can see, as an MSL, you're going to be working with everybody. So medical information, that's the part of the department that is writing letters about efficacy or tolerability, safety issues. They're really gathering all the information about safety, especially post-launch, any issues that might crop up. But I'm working with MedInfo to say, hey, this safety issue seems to come up. We should get a letter about that. IISs, those are studies after a drug has been launched. So you've already got a drug on a market, and let's say a doctor wants to do a small study using your drug for a different disease. They can write a small study about that. And some of those small studies end up becoming clinical trials, huge, large clinical trials where now we're trying to get FDA approval to use our drug in a different way. Managed care, that's trying to get our drug access with insurance companies. So trying to get formulary. So again, we could have some involvement with that, especially giving talks about our data, trying to get our drugs approved for formulary. As I said, sales and marketing. There's a bit of a firewall with most companies. They don't want you working with the sales reps too much Because again, you have to distinguish yourself as not being sales. But sales reps can help you get an introduction meeting. Marketing is also a very important group that you want to have a good relationship with. Okay. And again, there's a million duties that an MSL could potentially do. As I said, it's really going to depend on the company. Smaller companies might have you do a lot more of these duties just because they don't have the manpower. So, I love small companies because I feel that I get to really help the company a lot. You can really make a name for yourself and progress and learn a lot. And, it's really a great learning experience and a way to contribute, yourself as an MSL. Larger companies, on the other hand, that has 100 MSLs, you might not do as many of these duties. You might just simply be going out in the field, meeting with your doctor, talking about the data, coming back home, and that's it. So it really depends on the size of the company and what your interest level is. And again, the drug cycle, we have impact at every point of the drug cycle. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing I want to mention is that you really are focused on patient care. As I said, we're involved with drug discovery, getting clinical trials set up, or looking for ideas for small studies or large clinical trials. We're gaining insights about using our drug in different ways, trying to get new indications. We're having discussions about specific patients. And so the doctor might ask you, is your drug a good choice? Is there issues that are coming up? So you are directly involved in patient care, okay? And you're helping to guide that physician to make the best choice. And again, we do our best to remain unbiased. We don't want to just push our drug all the time. We might say, yeah, in this case, our drug is not a great option. Maybe use this other drug. Okay. Next slide, please. So what does it take to become an MSL? So as I said, typically you have to have a doctorate of some sort, usually a PharmD, PhD, or MD. In some cases, a KOL that is a physician's assistant or a nurse might get asked by a company to become an MSL as well. So it's not unheard of for someone without a doctorate to become an MSL. But that being said, most companies will typically require you to have a doctorate. So if a PA gets hired at a company, if they want to go to a new company, they're going to have a difficult time and they might have to get a doctorate. This also has a breakdown on the percentage of the different degrees that are MSLs. This says 39% of MSLs are PhDs. I think that's a little high, personally. At my last company, there were 10 MSLs. I was the only PhD. At my new company, there's 14 of us, and I'd say about maybe 25% of us are PhDs. But that being said, PhDs are hired, and the number of PhDs absolutely is increasing in the field because you're learning a lot of the skill sets that really make an MSL excel. Okay, next slide, please. So travel, yes, of course. So as an MSL, yes, we are field-based. You're going to have to travel. Ironically, as an MSL right now, I'm not doing any travel, but I'm still keeping busy. And again, the amount of travel you're going to have is really going to depend on the therapeutic area and how big your company is. So at my last company, you can see how big my territory was. Everything in red was my territory. And honestly, it was too much. It was too much travel. You're going to too many locations where you're not able to meet with the same KOL often enough to develop those strong relationships. So the company I'm at right now, I've only got 4 states, and most of the interactions I have, to be honest, are within Chicago. So for the most part, my travel, quote unquote, is really just in the car, going and meeting with the doctors and then coming back home. So larger companies, usually you have a smaller territory. Smaller companies usually have a larger territory. But again, there's some exceptions to that rule. Okay, next slide. So lots of travel. Again, like I said, it really depends on the field. When I was in dermatology, or I still am in dermatology, there's a lot of emphasis in beauty and aesthetics, and so we have a lot of conferences. And fortunately, they're all mostly in very fun locations. So these are just a handful of places that I've been to for over the past 3 years. But again, it's really going to depend on the company and the therapeutic area. If you're in, let's say, cardiology, you might not go to as many conferences. You might just go to like one or two large conferences, and that type of area that you're in the company. Next slide, please. So salary and bonus, fun stuff here. So yeah, I mean, it is a lucrative job. That's in part why it's so competitive to get in. There's a pretty nice balance between male and female. It's a little less with the female average, but it's getting pretty close. But yeah, so if you're a brand new MSL coming in, you can expect to make maybe $120,000, $130,000 a year. But you can see it quickly goes up with experience. And if you go to another company, typically you get 10 to 30% increase in your salary as well. Eventually, it does kind of cap out, but yeah, you can see it's a decent salary. A lot of companies also offer bonuses between 10 and 30%, which is nice. Not to give too much info, but when I first started out, I made well under the average here. They kind of took advantage of the fact that I was a postdoc, not making much money. But after about a year, I was able to prove my worth, and I was able to negotiate a higher salary. And then when I went to a new company, again, I was able to jump. Now I'm higher than the average for the amount of experience I have. So my advice is don't chase the salary, chase the opportunity. The money will come in time. It's better to pick a role that you'll be happy with. Okay. So yeah, benefits again. A lot of companies offer bonuses, sign-on bonuses, good insurance. It's field-based, so most companies you have to have a car typically. Some companies will pay you a stipend if you just want to own your own car. Most often, though, they'll provide a company car. So again, a little bit about my path. So I had some patient care, working as a nurse's aide when I was at Rush Medical Center after college. Went and got my master's. Kind of undecided if I wanted to get my PhD or go into medical school. I honestly got kind of burnt out of science, and I went into sales for a little bit, which was honestly great because it helped to teach me, communication and developing relationships and that type of thing. Went back to Loyola where I got my PhD, and I was pretty successful. I came out with highest distinction, got several first author publications, including one in Science, and on paper I was pretty much headed towards academia, which I knew in my heart I didn't want to do. But I really wasn't sure what else was out there. Being in the Midwest, we don't really learn about pharma and what kinds of opportunities there are. So I decided to kind of buy myself a little bit of time. I went and did my postdoc for a few years. That's where I got involved in the Postdoc Association, was able to learn about different options. And that's where I learned about the MSL role. If you can go to the next slide, please. So a couple things I knew that I love science, but I didn't want to be in a lab for the rest of my life. I didn't want to write grants or manuscripts. But there was a lot of things about, being a student that I loved. I love to give presentations. I love attending conferences and learning science and cutting edge research. I personally like the big picture kind of stuff that is, data that can translate to patient care. I like to teach as well. I also wanted a job that would, of course, pay money. I think everybody wants a little bit of money. I wanted a good work-life balance. I didn't want to be stuck in an office 80 hours a week. And again, I wanted a job that I could have, good security, independence. One thing I can say is that if you go to pharma, anywhere in pharma, you're going to learn how much respect you get. It's it blows your hair back, honestly. I mean, when I was in academia, I never felt like I was getting appreciation. Oh my gosh, if you go to pharma, they will love anything and everything you do. And you really feel the appreciation. Okay. This is one place to start, I feel like, if you are kind of considering different career options. My IDP website. It's basically an aptitude test. It's questionnaires for your skill set as well as your interests. My advice is, if you do take this, to be as honest as possible. Don't try to manipulate your answers to fit with whatever career you might be thinking about. So be honest. And this is actually a screenshot from my IDP. And you can see that, the very first one at the top, sales and marketing, including Medical Science Liaison, I got a 97% match. So this is where I started. I did this first, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. What is a Medical Science Liaison? I didn't really understand the role at that time, and I researched it a lot. I met with MSLs, and I discovered that, yeah, this really is a role that I think would be a good fit for me. And of course, I had to spend a lot of time preparing for it. Okay, next slide. This is another optional thing you can do. There's a lot of different strengths finders tests you can do online. This is one I took, Clifton Strengths, and it's better to not think of it as strengths and weaknesses. Instead, it's really to tell you what are your top strengths. These are kind of like your superpowers, and where you should really focus your strengths, and do these strengths align with any type of job? Of course, I mean they can be applied to anything. But for me, you can see number 5 is communication, which I think is very key to be an MSL. Significance, I like to have a job where I feel like I'm making an impact. Ideation, I like to come up with different ideas and see if I can put them in place. So don't get discouraged if you have strengths that don't necessarily align. You can really use your strength anywhere, any field. But I think it is helpful if you have some of these that do align with what an MSL might require. Okay. So how do I become an MSL? There's a lot of different workshops offered by conferences you can go to that offer great, career advice, how to write a resume, how to interview, that type of thing. There are some MSL courses. The one I took was called From Science to Pharma. And it's great. It has a lot of videos about, just kind of your daily interactions. What is an MSL? How do I break in? How to interview, how to write a resume. It has a lot of great information. The MSL Society also, it's good to keep tabs with them to network. They do have a lot of good networking events. There's one in Vegas every year that they have. You can meet a lot of different recruiters and hiring managers and aspiring MSLs, and just a good way to kind of put a face with a name. You have to have a professional LinkedIn page. Can't emphasize that enough. Try to have key terms that are in line with your role as an MSL, and that also goes hand in hand with your resume. Resumes are key, are crucial. So again, try to find other MSLs' resumes and use that as a template. And of course, networking is crucial. Something like 80% of all pharma jobs are done through networking. So again, if you meet the right person, they can sometimes put a good word in for you, get you in touch with the hiring manager, and that helps a lot. Okay. So interviews, the interview process, I would not recommend just saying, hey, I'm going to be an MSL today and start submitting your resumes everywhere if you are not prepared, because there is a process. The interviews are very in-depth. They want to make sure they have the right candidate. It's extremely competitive. So of course, there's good places where you can find a job. But the interview process, typically, you'll start out with a phone interview with the HR manager. They're just kind of a gatekeeper to see if you have the interpersonal skills and a lot of the skill sets that they're looking for. And if that goes well, they'll put you in touch usually with your direct manager. And usually you can tell within about 10 minutes or so if it's going well or not. Usually the longer the call, the better. They might try to set up an in-person interview on the phone. That's of course a very good sign. And if you do the in-person interview, they can last half a day or even all day. You'll meet with a lot of different people, within the medical affairs department. So again, they're really just trying to see, do you have those, personal skills, communication, and most often they'll have you present a scientific paper or some kind of article or something. So there is usually a scientific presentation as well. Okay. And again, there's a lot of preparation that goes into with these interviews. A lot of behavioral questions, MSL specific questions. My advice is try to be as genuine as possible. Don't try to have your responses sound canned. Just try to be authentic, try to be honest, and have good motivations for why that company is a good fit and why you can bring to that company. Okay? And so where to next? So now let's say you've been an MSL. Are you going to be an MSL for the rest of your life? Well, if you want to, absolutely. A lot of MSLs are happy where they're at, and they continue to just kind of move up the ladder, become a senior MSL, executive MSL, make more money. After 1 year of experience, you're going to get a billion recruiters asking you to come work for them. And again, you can go into a different therapeutic area if you get bored, or if you want another company that has a smaller territory or more money. So there's a lot of options. You could become a manager, manage a team. You could become a medical director. A medical director is very similar to being a PI. You're looking at the data, you're helping to get studies up and running. And of course, you can go into marketing. There's just a lot of options because you are the central player and you're going to network with a lot of people in your company. And you can really use that to go into different areas.
Jeff,
Yep.
thank you very much for this amazing presentation. I think we have a lot of questions if we can start taking audience questions.
Okay.
I'm going to start with the first one we got. Okay, so one of the question was, do you think the postdoc position helped with your position now? Or if we were interested in MSL, should we go straight for that out of grad school?
Honestly, I think your expertise in your whatever field you're in is going to help you more than simply becoming a postdoc. So, so for instance, as a graduate student, I did dermatology research. I worked on vitiligo. As a postdoc, I worked on CRISPR-Cas and did sickle cell disease hematology. I can tell you the two companies I've interviewed with that are in dermatology did not ask me a single question about my postdoc. They did not care. They liked the fact that I had dermatology research experience. So again, your background is going to matter a lot more than just simply having a postdoc. If you use your postdoc to expand on your graduate school experience, that's fine. You can maybe use that time to meet with KOLs and that type of thing. But in my experience, having a postdoc doesn't necessarily help you.
So now we have a second question. The person says, I've been looking to break into MSL roles for quite some time and been struggling a little bit. Any advice on making myself a more attractive candidate?
Yeah. So again, I think for your first time role, again, these companies are hiring pharmacists, they're hiring medical doctors, yes. But you as a PhD, you are coming in with value because you have that scientific experience. And if you can start looking for companies that have drugs that are somewhat in line with your research background, they're going to love you. They're going to go, you are already an expert and they want that experience from you. So my advice is initially try to find a company that's somewhat in line a little bit with your research area. Um, I also suggest to look for only smaller and medium-sized companies when you're starting out. Large companies won't even consider you if you don't have several years of MSL experience already. And again, it's going to come down to networking and how you sell yourself. In your interviews, becoming authentic, having good communication skills, having a good resume. Um, uh, and again, there's some courses online, like I said, you can do to kind of help you guide to get that far as well. But yeah, it is difficult. It is difficult to break in. I'm not saying if you just simply randomly put a resume to a company, you won't get a job. It can happen. But like I said, play to your strengths would be my advice.
So we have a next question. How much did you have to prove your science communication skills? Some of the opportunities which our GPS STEM program gives us is to record your talks and elevator pitch competition or TED Talks. Would you recommend something like a website, etc.? How much was your publication record emphasized?
Yeah, well, my publication record, there were a few questions that came up about that. Oh wow, so because actually the first company I interviewed with they were interested in vitiligo, so they asked me a few questions about that. I don't think your publication record is that crucial. It's more about your experience, and again, it's more about you as a person. I think also having those interpersonal skills. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a stigma that PhDs are kind of antisocial. We don't really know how to talk in public. So try to overcome that and prove that, yeah, I can carry conversation. I can develop relationships. The science, as I said, you should be way ahead of the curve of talking about the science. I would say every conversation is going to be a little different. Usually you're just kind of breaking the surface. You don't want to jump into the, like, I'm doing histology studies or whatever. You don't typically go that in depth. Um, as far as taking online courses to communicate, sure. I mean, practice makes perfect. You don't want to try to come off as genuine, as authentic as you can. Show that you can get the information across clearly and concisely. And as an MSL, we should really be listening more than just spitting out a bunch of data. Um, so as far as proving yourself that you know how to communicate the data, you'll prove that during your interview, and when they hire you. Again, we hire, a lot of these companies are hiring PharmDs and MDs that aren't that strong in science, and it's something that they will get you up to speed eventually. So that's what I'm saying. You're already ahead of the curve with the science.
So we have another question from Anonymous. No, actually, it's from Swati. I wanted to ask that a person just embarking on a career as MSL, is it better to join a big company where you don't get involved in multiple areas or roles as MSL, but you also travel less, or join a smaller company where you're involved in multiple areas but have to travel a lot?
Right. I mean, so the issue, as I said again, is it's hard typically to break into a large company without having MSL experience. A lot of these companies want you to have several years of experience. There are some exceptions to that. So again, if you just happen to meet the right person, maybe you can get a job. There's also some temp agencies. There's one called Best MSLs, and those usually do work with larger companies. And in that case, you're going to be kind of like MSL light. You're not going to get all the full responsibilities as an MSL. You might just you're going to be treated more like a sales rep, to be honest. You're just going to be going out, meeting with a ton of doctors, just trying to crank out as many numbers as you can, that I met with 1 million doctors and getting the insights. Usually those temp agencies the company will not allow you to see all of the data. There's a lot of non-disclosure agreements that they just honestly will not let you see anything. So it's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, get a little bit of MSL experience. But like I said, most often you're going to have better luck getting hired at a small to medium-sized company. It's a great way to get a lot of experience. As I said, the territory, it depends. It could be large or small, depending on a small or large company. But if you have to do a couple of years with a small company, that's fine. And then you could always transition to a larger company, smaller territory later on.
Awesome. We have another question. Do you think your sales experience in between grad school helped you make you a more competitive candidate at as MSL?
Yes and no. Again, I think it was just something that I learned how to talk, more comfortably. Again, we're not sales. We're not trying to, I can't say we're 100% unbiased. There's of course always going to be a little bit of bias as an MSL. But again, you're just kind of developing those interpersonal skills. I can tell you, when I was working with a recruiter for a job that I applied for, they told me to actually remove my sales experience from my resume. They said, they didn't want it on the resume. They said, focus on your science background. Try not to get pigeonholed that you're a salesperson. So again, I think it's a good way to develop skill sets, but it's something I don't really emphasize ever.
This is an interesting one. You mentioned that the first company you got into was dermatologics, related to dermatology, and your research was also on vitiligo. So this question is really, I was actually itching to ask this. So what's a good way to boost technical skills for MSL if your PhD research isn't directly related to Medical Science Liaison, the company you're getting into?
Yeah, again, I mean, as a scientist, as I said, it helps if you have that therapeutic area background, research background. But the great thing about us as a scientist is that we can quickly adapt and learn new therapeutic areas pretty quickly. I can go into cardiology or whatever and start picking up papers and reading and understanding it enough to communicate that science, that data. So it might be enough to get you on the phone, like get a phone call. Hey, we saw you had this, background. But from there, it's all your skill sets have to take over. Your communication skills, your understanding of the role, all these things. So it might be enough to get your foot in the door, but it's not enough to be like a guaranteed thing that your research is going to help you get a job. And again, companies hire medical doctors and pharmacists that don't have any research experience. So So as a PhD, it's something you can leverage. I think it helps, but it's not completely necessary.
So the next question starts as, do MSLs usually stay in the same field as their PhD background? I believe based on your just answer, what you gave answer is no. But the question, I guess the person works in microbiome. So I do Alzheimer's disease research, but within that I do microbiome research as well. Obviously, microbiome research is exploding and many organ systems and diseases are involved. How much jumping around you see within MSL positions from field to field?
It depends. A lot of MSLs get bored. you might you might just get bored with your company talking about the same drug. Maybe that company doesn't have a good pipeline of new drugs. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities come up. You might stay in the same field if you love it. You might discover that, for instance, oncology is very competitive, but it burns you out. Oncology is a very demanding field for MSLs. Some people love it. Some people want a slower pace. So it really depends on your personality, what opportunities are out there for you. If an MSL loves a company, loves a job, they're not going to leave. So I think with any company, any job, it comes more down to the company culture and your managers and what opportunities they have. That matters a lot more than the therapeutic area that you're in. So you might be interested in that therapeutic area, and it just kind of keeps you excited about it. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the one reason to keep you in a certain field or not. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Uh, I had one question which was sent before the seminar started, and I promised the person that I will make sure this doesn't get lost. So it seems like we have a few more minutes. So the person asked, while in grad school, what can we do to increase our chances of landing in an MSL position when we graduate? Are there any specific courses, internships, or tools to compensate for our lack of industry experience?
Yeah,
Some of it
exactly.
got answered. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, a lot of these companies, as I said, they do want you to have some experience. Smaller, medium-sized companies might take a chance on you with zero experience. But yeah, absolutely, there are things that you can do. As I said, there are some courses. The From Science to Pharma course is a good one. I think I do have a discount code, Chicago. But either way, I mean, so there are courses you can take. And actually, to be honest, when I put that course on my resume, that made my resume stand out. And the hiring manager and the HR person were asking me about it, like, "Oh, what is this course? What did you learn?" And they were a little more eager to talk with me, knowing that I had taken those extra steps to learn about the role and to take that course. So that's one thing. Um, Again, you're working on research, but I'm sure there's some clinical trials that might be happening. Try to figure out who these top physicians are within the field and maybe reach out to them, see if you can network with them. They work with every pharmaceutical company, and maybe they can put you in touch with somebody. Um, you know, Again, a lot of this job is about developing your interpersonal skills, your communication skills. There's a lot of things you can. Toastmasters is one. It's a free thing you can sign up. A lot of cities offer it. It's just a good way to learn how to public speak. Um, and again, get on LinkedIn and start reaching out to people that MSLs, people that work in pharmaceutical companies. Try not to be too aggressive. Like, hey, I saw this job. Can I give you my resume? Just more like, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. Just want to kind of learn about your role. How did you break in? Do you have 5 minutes to chat? That type of thing.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Could you introduce what your daily work looks like? What do you think is the biggest challenge you face as an MSL?
Yeah. So, in a perfect world, I would have a perfect schedule. There's, MSLs that have it down to a science, that have been an MSL for a long time and their company kind of allows it. So, for instance, their week might look like where on a Monday, they'll stay at home and do all their paperwork, getting all their insights recorded, do all their expenses. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they'll be out in the field, either traveling by car or by plane. Depends. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're home. I don't have that luxury. My daily schedule is a little different. So I'm kind of planning different interactions, day by day, week by week, month by month. Some KOLs are so busy, you might have to plan 3 months down the road. Some will say, hey, last minute, hey, can you come in tomorrow? And I'm like, okay, I got to kind of change things around. Um, and then again, that's just our field interactions. But I'm also working a lot internally. There's a lot of projects that I'm working with. I'm working with the training team, training new sales reps as they come in, educating them, helping to work on medical decks that we're going to use out in the field to give our presentations. There's a lot of areas that I work with internally, which I enjoy. That can take a lot of time up, so it really kind of depends on your style. If you'd rather just be out in the field talking to doctors, there are rules for that as well. So every day is a little different for me, but like I said, some MSLs do have it down, a very good routine. I don't have that, unfortunately.
So this is a question which I'm always curious to ask. Kristen Gabriel, she asked the question. Thank you, Kristen. So she had a question about what's about your work-life balance. You have to travel a lot. I'm sure depending on if there's too much of travel and too many appointments and all that, it might drive you crazy. And do you think that how much has it changed since your work-life balance you had during PhD postdoc period? How do you maintain that balance? So first challenge, how has it changed, and how do you make sure that it stays sane and you don't go crazy?
Well, I mean, for my postdoc, I was in the lab every single day. So I was feeding cells every day, and having to commute there just to feed cells for 10 minutes and then come back home was always a pain. And you're writing papers and reading studies and all that stuff. So you're working 50, 60, 70 hours depending on the week. The thing to keep in mind with an MSL is that when you're traveling, even if your interaction is only 10 minutes, if you're gone, that's 24 hours of the day that you have technically worked. But again, every company is a little different. The amount of travel you do is different. The good thing is that there is a lot of independence. You're making your own schedule, and you're really dictating how much time you want to be out in the field, how many interactions you want to have, that type of thing. Some companies will have, minimum targets they want you to have. Like, for instance, our company wants us to have, let's say, 20 interactions a month. That interaction could be in person, or it could be a good phone conversation. So I can just stay at home and make a couple calls, and I'm having my interactions. I'm lucky that I live in a major city, so I can knock out a lot of interactions just by driving or Ubering for maybe once or twice a week, and then coming home that same day. So, and then you might have a conference come up, and so you might be away from home for a few days or a week. So it really depends on your output, how much effort do you want to put to being on the field, and the company, and what their expectations are. But the great thing is that, again, you make your own schedule. So I might say, you know what, I don't want to go out at all Thursday, Friday at all. I'm just going to stay at home, and I can set that up. I don't have to go out if I don't want to. Nobody's really keeping tabs on you so much. So you are your own boss. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. And again, I've got a job where I can do the majority of my interactions same day, be home same day. So it's really going to depend on you.
So we have one question. I think I missed that one. I believe the question means, is it difficult if you have an oncology background? What about oncology makes it more difficult? Is that I wonder if the person wants to ask does it matter which field you're from? If you're from neuroscience, if you're from dermatology, maybe there are tons of companies and then therefore tons of MSLs. But if you're from oncology or a field where there are not that many drugs, does that vary from field to field, the number?
Yes, again, as I said, your research, you can leverage that to help you get into a company that might have that focus, but it's not mandatory. And what I meant about oncology is that it's the most highly sought field within the MSL role. Typically because MSL oncologists typically make more money. It's also it's like boot camp. You learn everything as an MSL when you're in the oncology field. And it's a great way if you want to move up the ladder, become a medical director, become a vice president, whatever. If you can say you've done oncology MSL, role, that means that any company is going to look at you and go, oh yeah, this person can do anything. So if you have that oncology research background, that's only going to help you. But yeah, so as I said, you don't have to stick with that same therapeutic area that you've done your research with. It might help you to get a job initially, but it's not required. And you can always jump around, go to a different therapeutic area later on once you're an MSL. So it's not totally sales reps. Trust me, it's not as easy of a job as you would think for pharma. But yeah, I wouldn't really put it as a ranking. We're respected for different reasons. Okay, the MSLs are there more for guidance for the drug, help with drug development. So we are absolutely respected, especially by the sales reps. But I don't know if you can weigh one over the other.
With COVID-19 crisis, I believe the markets are going down, and I'm sure very soon, if this lasts for too long, the job people are going to lose jobs. How do you feel about that in your MSL position?
So your job security as an MSL depends on where you're at in the drug launch cycle. So do you have a drug that's getting ready to come out, or did it just recently come out? You as an MSL are a crucial component to that company. If you're at a company that you've only got one drug and it's been on the market for 10 years already, they can probably cut you. They don't need you that much. If it's a company that the drug might not pass its clinical trials, they might cut you as well. I can tell you that right now, I'm at a company where we are getting ready to launch a drug in a year. They need all hands on deck. They need the MSLs out in the field, talking to our KOLs, talking about the therapeutic area, the mechanism of action. So they need us. They're not going to get rid of us. We might have to move to a virtual system where we'll have our meetings just like this instead of being person to person or face to face, but that's fine. We can still do our job. I can also say that hiring has not halted for MSLs. I am continuously getting LinkedIn requests to interview for jobs. A lot of companies need MSLs. They are still actively looking. It takes time to get an MSL job. And so they're not pressing the pause button. They are still looking for MSLs.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. This brings us to the end of our first webinar, Life Beyond PhD. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule, and I'm sure you got tons of calls and video calls lined up. And I would like to thank our attendees. Thank you very much for joining us, and apologies for a little bit of a technical snag in the beginning, and I promise you will be much better next time. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.